Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that the Dallas Police Department, DPD, current patrol zone assignments may not be optimally aligned with evolving crime patterns and response time metrics across various precincts within Dallas, Texas. The Chief of Police is considering a significant restructuring of these zones to improve efficiency and resource allocation. Which of the following approaches represents the most effective and procedurally sound method for implementing such a change? Option A. Immediately implement new patrol zone boundaries based on the Chief's assessment of current needs, informing officers of the changes via a departmental bulletin. Option B. Prioritize reducing overtime expenditures by consolidating patrol zones, even if it means longer travel times for officers to certain areas within their assigned zones. Option C. Reassign patrol zones based on anecdotal reports from a few senior officers regarding perceived inefficiencies, without formal data collection or broader consultation. Option D. Conduct a thorough analysis of crime data and response times. Solicit feedback from patrol supervisors and officers on the practical implications of potential zone adjustments, and then propose a revised zone map based on this comprehensive review and input. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough analysis of crime data and response times. Solicit feedback from patrol supervisors and officers on the practical implications of potential zone adjustments, and then propose a revised zone map based on this comprehensive review and input. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient resource allocation with the long-term implications of departmental policy and officer morale. A hasty decision without proper consultation could lead to resentment, decreased productivity, and potential violations of established DPD procedures or civil service regulations in Texas. The Chief's authority is significant, but it must be exercised within the bounds of fairness and established protocols to maintain trust and operational effectiveness. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a structured review and consultation process. This entails gathering data on current patrol patterns, response times, and officer feedback regarding the existing zone assignments. Subsequently, presenting these findings and proposed adjustments to the relevant stakeholders, including patrol supervisors and potentially a representative body of officers, for discussion and input is crucial. This collaborative method ensures that any changes are data-driven, consider the practical realities faced by officers, and align with DPD's commitment to fair and equitable work distribution, thereby optimizing processes without undermining morale or procedural integrity. This aligns with the principles of good governance and operational management expected within a public service organization like the Dallas Police Department. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing changes unilaterally without any consultation or data analysis is procedurally unsound. It bypasses established channels for policy modification and fails to consider the practical impact on the officers who will be directly affected. This approach risks creating an environment of distrust and can lead to unintended negative consequences, such as increased overtime due to inefficient new zones or decreased morale. Furthermore, it could potentially conflict with Texas civil service regulations regarding fair labor practices and employee input in significant operational changes. Proposing changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or personal preference, without objective data, is also professionally weak. While anecdotal feedback can be a starting point, it is not a sufficient basis for significant operational restructuring. This approach lacks the rigor required for effective process optimization and could lead to solutions that are not truly beneficial or may even exacerbate existing issues. It fails to demonstrate a commitment to evidence-based decision-making, a cornerstone of efficient public service. Focusing exclusively on reducing overtime costs without considering the impact on patrol effectiveness or officer workload is a narrow and potentially detrimental approach. While cost control is important, it should not be the sole driver of operational changes. Such a singular focus can lead to understaffing in critical areas, increased stress on officers, and a decline in the quality of service provided to the citizens of Dallas, ultimately undermining the DPD's core mission. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization by first understanding the current state through data collection and stakeholder engagement. This involves identifying the problem or opportunity for improvement, gathering relevant information, analyzing potential solutions, and then implementing the chosen solution in a phased and consultative manner. Continuous monitoring and evaluation are essential to ensure the optimization is effective and sustainable. In situations involving public safety personnel, respecting established civil service regulations and fostering a culture of trust and collaboration are paramount. Question 2. The performance metrics show a consistent upward trend in average response times for Priority 1 calls within the Dallas Police Department. Which of the following strategies would be the most effective and ethically sound approach to address this issue? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire dispatch and patrol deployment workflow, utilizing data analytics to identify specific bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then implement targeted process improvements based on these findings. Option B. Implement a new advanced dispatch software system immediately without a pilot program or thorough integration assessment to see if it can speed up call handling. Option C. Immediately increase the number of patrol units deployed during peak hours, assuming that more officers on the street will naturally reduce response times. Option D. Initiate a performance review for all dispatchers and patrol officers, attributing the increased response times primarily to individual performance issues. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire dispatch and patrol deployment workflow, utilizing data analytics to identify specific bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then implement targeted process improvements based on these findings. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning increase in response times for emergency calls within the Dallas Police Department, DPD. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public safety and the DPD's ability to fulfill its core mission. Delays in responding to emergencies can have severe consequences, ranging from increased property damage to loss of life. Therefore, careful judgment and a systematic approach to process optimization are crucial. The best approach involves a data-driven analysis of the entire dispatch and response workflow, identifying bottlenecks, and implementing evidence-based solutions. This includes reviewing call intake procedures, dispatcher workload, officer deployment strategies, and communication systems. The goal is to streamline operations without compromising the quality of service or officer safety. This approach aligns with the DPD's commitment to efficient and effective law enforcement, as mandated by departmental policies and the Texas Local Government Code, which implicitly requires departments to operate efficiently to serve the public. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of officers on patrol without understanding the root cause of the delays is flawed. This might lead to increased personnel costs without addressing underlying inefficiencies in the dispatch or communication systems, potentially masking the real problem. It fails to optimize the existing resources and processes. Another ineffective approach would be to implement a new, unproven technology without adequate testing or integration planning. This could disrupt current operations, introduce new complexities, and potentially worsen response times if not properly implemented. It bypasses the necessary steps of analysis and pilot testing, which are essential for successful process optimization. Focusing on individual officer performance as the sole reason for increased response times, without considering systemic factors, is also problematic. While individual performance is important, a departmental-wide increase in response times suggests broader systemic issues that need to be addressed through process improvement rather than singling out individual officers. This approach risks demoralizing staff and failing to achieve sustainable improvements. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes data collection and analysis. This involves clearly defining the problem, gathering relevant data, identifying potential causes, developing and evaluating solutions, implementing the chosen solution, and continuously monitoring its effectiveness. This systematic process ensures that interventions are targeted, evidence-based, and contribute to long-term improvements in operational efficiency and public safety. Question 3. The performance metrics show a significant increase in emergency call response times across various sectors of Dallas. Which of the following process optimization strategies would best address this issue while adhering to the principles of efficient and effective public service for the Dallas Police Department? Option A. Base optimization decisions solely on feedback from a select group of veteran officers regarding perceived inefficiencies. Option B. Conduct a thorough data-driven analysis of dispatch protocols, patrol deployment patterns, and communication system efficiency to identify specific bottlenecks and implement targeted improvements. Option C. Implement a new, advanced dispatch software system without prior assessment of its integration with current DPD infrastructure. Option D. Immediately increase the number of patrol officers assigned to all shifts to ensure greater coverage and faster response. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough data-driven analysis of dispatch protocols, patrol deployment patterns, and communication system efficiency to identify specific bottlenecks and implement targeted improvements. Explanation: the performance metrics show a significant increase in response times for emergency calls within the Dallas Police Department, DPD. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public safety and the DPD's ability to fulfill its core mission. Delays in responding to critical incidents can have severe consequences, ranging from increased risk of harm to victims to diminished public trust. Therefore, a careful and evidence-based approach to process optimization is paramount. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of current dispatch and patrol deployment protocols, utilizing data analytics to identify specific bottlenecks and inefficiencies. This includes analyzing call volume patterns, response routes, officer availability, and communication system performance. The goal is to implement data-driven changes that streamline operations and reduce response times without compromising officer safety or service quality. This aligns with the DPD's commitment to efficient and effective law enforcement, as mandated by departmental policies and the broader principles of public service, which prioritize timely and appropriate responses to community needs. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of officers on duty without analyzing the underlying causes of delays is flawed. While more officers might seem like a direct solution, it fails to address potential inefficiencies in dispatch, communication, or patrol routing. This could lead to increased personnel costs without a proportional improvement in response times, and may even exacerbate existing issues if not integrated with a broader optimization strategy. It neglects the critical step of understanding why response times are increasing. Another incorrect approach would be to implement new technology without a thorough assessment of its compatibility with existing systems and the training needs of personnel. While technology can be a powerful tool for optimization, a hasty or poorly integrated implementation can create new problems, disrupt workflows, and fail to deliver the intended benefits. This approach bypasses the essential diagnostic phase and risks introducing further complications. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few officers without objective data analysis is professionally unsound. While officer experience is valuable, decisions regarding departmental processes should be grounded in verifiable data to ensure fairness, effectiveness, and accountability. Relying on subjective feedback can lead to biased conclusions and ineffective solutions that do not address the root causes of the performance issues. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and gathering relevant data. This data should then be analyzed to identify root causes and potential solutions. Proposed solutions should be evaluated for their feasibility, cost-effectiveness, and potential impact on all stakeholders, including the public and department personnel. Pilot testing and continuous monitoring are crucial to ensure that implemented changes achieve the desired outcomes and to allow for further adjustments. Question 4. The control framework reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer is responding to a call regarding a person exhibiting erratic behavior in a public park in Dallas, Texas. A concerned citizen reports the individual is acting drunk and making a scene. Upon arrival, the officer observes the individual sitting on a park bench, speaking loudly on a mobile phone, and occasionally gesturing animatedly. The individual's speech is somewhat slurred, and they appear unsteady when they stand up to acknowledge the officer. The officer has not observed the individual stumble, fall, or pose a direct threat to themselves or others, nor has the officer detected the odor of alcohol. Based on these observations and the citizen's report, what is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take regarding potential public intoxication under Texas law? Option A. Conduct a thorough on-scene assessment of the individual's behavior, coordination, and the surrounding environment to determine if probable cause exists for public intoxication under Texas Penal Code Section 49.02, considering all observable evidence. Option B. Disregard the situation as the individual is not actively causing harm or a direct danger, and the evidence of intoxication is not definitive. Option C. Immediately issue a citation for public intoxication based on the citizen's report and the observed slurred speech, as these are indicators of impairment. Option D. Detain the individual for further questioning and a field sobriety test, even without clear evidence of a threat or significant impairment, to rule out any potential violation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough on-scene assessment of the individual's behavior, coordination, and the surrounding environment to determine if probable cause exists for public intoxication under Texas Penal Code Section 49.02, considering all observable evidence. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a Dallas Police Department DPD officer is presented with conflicting information regarding a potential violation of Texas state law concerning public intoxication. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the officer to exercise discretion and judgment under pressure, balancing the need for thorough investigation with the efficient allocation of departmental resources. The officer must consider the immediate safety of the individual and the public, while also adhering to DPD policies and Texas statutes. Misinterpreting the situation could lead to an unjustified arrest, a missed opportunity to intervene in a dangerous situation, or an unnecessary drain on police time. The best approach involves a thorough, on-scene assessment of the individual's behavior and environment, coupled with an understanding of the legal standard for public intoxication under Texas Penal Code Section 49.02. This approach prioritizes gathering objective evidence of impairment and the risk posed to the individual or others. By observing the individual's physical coordination, speech, and demeanor, and considering the surrounding circumstances, the officer can make an informed decision based on observable facts rather than assumptions or hearsay. This aligns with the DPD's mandate to enforce laws fairly and effectively, ensuring that interventions are justified by probable cause and are consistent with the principles of due process. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a citizen's complaint without independent verification. This fails to uphold the standard of probable cause required for an arrest and could lead to the detention of an individual who is not violating any laws. It also risks alienating the public if unwarranted stops occur. Another incorrect approach is to immediately issue a citation or make an arrest based on a single symptom, such as slurred speech, without considering other factors or the totality of the circumstances. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could result in a wrongful arrest, undermining public trust and potentially leading to legal challenges. Finally, ignoring the situation due to a perceived lack of severity without a proper assessment is also professionally unacceptable. It neglects the officer's duty to investigate potential violations and ensure public safety, potentially allowing a dangerous situation to escalate. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant laws and departmental policies. This involves active listening to all parties involved, conducting a thorough and objective observation of the situation, and gathering all available evidence. The officer should then analyze this information against the legal standards for probable cause and departmental guidelines for intervention. If the evidence supports a violation and intervention is warranted, the officer should proceed with the appropriate course of action, documenting all steps taken. If the evidence is insufficient, the officer should disengage, but remain observant and prepared to reevaluate if circumstances change. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer has received a public information request for a detailed incident report related to a recent high-profile investigation. The officer is aware that the report contains sensitive details about the victim's personal life and information that could potentially compromise the ongoing investigation. Considering the Dallas Police Department's adherence to Texas law, what is the most appropriate course of action for the officer? Option A. Provide the requesting party with a summary of the investigation based on the officer's personal understanding of what is not sensitive. Option B. Deny the request outright, citing the sensitive nature of the investigation without further consultation or review. Option C. Consult DPD policies and the Texas Public Information Act to determine which portions of the report are exempt from disclosure, redacting any sensitive or exempt information before releasing the remainder of the report, and seeking supervisory approval. Option D. Release the entire incident report immediately to ensure full transparency and compliance with public information requests. The correct answer is C. Consult DPD policies and the Texas Public Information Act to determine which portions of the report are exempt from disclosure, redacting any sensitive or exempt information before releasing the remainder of the report, and seeking supervisory approval. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Dallas Police Department, DPD, officer due to the inherent tension between departmental policy, the Texas Public Information Act, TPIA, and the privacy rights of individuals involved in an investigation. The officer must balance the public's right to access information with the need to protect sensitive investigative details and the privacy of victims or witnesses, all within the specific legal framework of Texas. Careful judgment is required to avoid violating either the TPIA or individual privacy rights, which could lead to legal repercussions for the officer and the department. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the DPD's internal policies regarding the release of information and a careful application of the Texas Public Information Act. This approach requires the officer to identify what information is explicitly exempt from disclosure under the TPIA, such as ongoing investigations, victim information, or information that could compromise law enforcement efforts. If the request pertains to information that is not exempt, the officer should consult with their supervisor and potentially the DPD's legal counsel to ensure proper redaction of any sensitive or exempt information before releasing the non-exempt portions of the report. This aligns with the DPD's duty to be transparent while upholding legal obligations and protecting individual privacy, as mandated by Texas law. Incorrect approaches analysis. Releasing the entire incident report without review would be a significant regulatory failure. This approach violates the TPIA provisions for exempting certain types of information, particularly those related to ongoing investigations or personal identifying information of victims and witnesses, thereby compromising privacy and potentially hindering law enforcement objectives. Denying the request outright without consulting departmental policy or the TPIA would also be a regulatory failure. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the public's right to access government information under Texas law and could lead to a formal complaint or legal challenge against the department. Attempting to release only the information that the officer personally believes is not sensitive, without a formal review process or consultation with supervisors or legal counsel, is an abdication of responsibility. This subjective approach risks overlooking specific TPIA exemptions or departmental policies, leading to inadvertent disclosure of protected information or an unjustified denial of public access. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, they must clearly understand the governing regulations and departmental policies. Second, they should identify the specific nature of the request and the information involved. Third, they should consult relevant legal exemptions and departmental guidelines to determine what can and cannot be disclosed. Fourth, if there is any ambiguity, they must seek guidance from supervisors or legal counsel. Finally, they should document their decision-making process and the basis for any release or denial of information. Question 6. The control framework reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer has recently learned that a close personal friend is a person of interest in an ongoing DPD investigation. The officer has not yet been assigned to this specific case, but is aware of its existence. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take to uphold departmental integrity and ethical standards in Dallas, Texas? Option A. Continue with their duties as normal, assuming they can remain impartial and avoid any influence from the personal relationship. Option B. Wait to see if they are assigned to the case before reporting the personal relationship to avoid unnecessary complications. Option C. Immediately report the personal relationship to their commanding officer and request to be recused from any involvement in the investigation. Option D. Discreetly contact the friend to gather more information about their involvement in the investigation to assess the situation. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the personal relationship to their commanding officer and request to be recused from any involvement in the investigation. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a Dallas Police Department, DPD, officer is faced with a potential conflict of interest due to a personal relationship with an individual involved in a pending investigation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it tests the officer's commitment to impartiality, integrity, and adherence to departmental policies designed to prevent corruption and maintain public trust. The officer must navigate the delicate balance between their personal life and their official duties, ensuring that no perception of bias or impropriety arises. The best professional approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the commanding officer and recusal from any aspect of the investigation. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential conflict of interest head-on, upholding the DPD's commitment to ethical conduct and the principle of unbiased law enforcement. Texas law and DPD internal affairs policies mandate that officers report any circumstances that could reasonably be perceived as a conflict of interest to prevent undue influence or favoritism. Recusal ensures that the investigation proceeds without any appearance of impropriety, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the DPD and the justice system. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investigation while attempting to remain impartial without disclosing the relationship. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risk of unconscious bias and the critical importance of maintaining public confidence. The appearance of impropriety, even if no actual wrongdoing occurs, can severely damage the credibility of the officer and the department. Another incorrect approach is to discuss the investigation details with the involved individual to clear the air. This constitutes a serious breach of confidentiality and departmental policy, potentially compromising the investigation and exposing the officer to disciplinary action. Finally, ignoring the situation and hoping it does not become an issue is also professionally unacceptable. This passive approach demonstrates a lack of ethical awareness and a failure to proactively manage potential conflicts, which can lead to significant repercussions for the officer and the DPD. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to policy, and the preservation of public trust. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the immediate step should be to identify the conflict, consult relevant departmental policies and ethical guidelines, and report the situation to the appropriate supervisor for guidance and action, which typically involves recusal. Question 7. The audit findings indicate that a batch of seized items from a recent arrest in Dallas, Texas, were not immediately logged into the evidence management system, and their secure storage was delayed by 24 hours due to a temporary system malfunction. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation in compliance with Dallas Police Department policies and Texas state law? Option A. Expedite the logging and storage of the delayed evidence, relying on the arresting officer's verbal confirmation that the evidence remained secure and unaltered during the 24-hour period. Option B. Segregate the delayed evidence from other processed items and conduct an immediate internal investigation into the officers involved for the procedural lapse, without prioritizing the immediate proper handling of the evidence itself. Option C. Immediately initiate a thorough review of the Dallas Police Department's general orders and the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure regarding evidence handling and chain of custody, ensuring all seized items are now properly logged, photographed, and secured with a complete chain of custody document initiated and maintained. Option D. Proceed with processing the rest of the day's incoming evidence and address the delayed items at the end of the shift, assuming the temporary system malfunction is the sole reason for the delay and no other procedural errors occurred. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a thorough review of the Dallas Police Department's general orders and the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure regarding evidence handling and chain of custody, ensuring all seized items are now properly logged, photographed, and secured with a complete chain of custody document initiated and maintained. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in the Dallas Police Department's adherence to Texas state laws and departmental policies concerning the handling of evidence. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to process evidence with the long-term integrity of investigations and the rights of individuals involved. A failure to meticulously follow established protocols can lead to compromised evidence, jeopardized prosecutions, and damage to public trust. The best approach involves a thorough review of the Dallas Police Department's general orders and relevant Texas Code of Criminal Procedure articles pertaining to evidence handling and chain of custody. This includes verifying that all seized items were properly logged, photographed, secured in designated evidence lockers, and that a complete chain of custody document was initiated and maintained for each item. This meticulous documentation and secure storage are mandated by Texas law to ensure the admissibility of evidence in court and to prevent tampering or loss. Adhering strictly to these established procedures protects the integrity of the investigation, upholds due process, and ensures accountability within the department. An approach that prioritizes the speed of processing over strict adherence to documentation and secure storage protocols is professionally unacceptable. This failure to initiate and maintain a proper chain of custody document, as required by departmental policy and implied by Texas evidentiary rules, creates a significant risk of evidence being deemed inadmissible in court. Furthermore, bypassing secure storage procedures, even temporarily, violates departmental general orders designed to prevent loss, contamination, or unauthorized access to evidence, thereby undermining the investigation's validity. Another unacceptable approach is to rely solely on the verbal assurances of officers that evidence was handled correctly without independent verification through the established logging and documentation system. While officer integrity is presumed, departmental policies and state laws necessitate a verifiable paper trail for all evidence. This lack of documented verification leaves the department vulnerable to challenges regarding the evidence's integrity and chain of custody, potentially leading to case dismissals. Finally, an approach that involves segregating evidence based on the perceived importance of the case rather than following standardized, department-wide protocols for logging and storage is also professionally unsound. Such selective application of procedures creates inconsistencies and opens the door to accusations of bias or preferential treatment, further eroding public trust and compromising the integrity of the evidence management system. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of applicable laws and departmental policies. When faced with potential discrepancies, the immediate step is to consult these authoritative sources. The next step is to gather all relevant documentation and conduct a thorough, objective review. If deficiencies are identified, the priority must be to rectify them in accordance with established procedures, documenting all corrective actions taken. Transparency and adherence to protocol are paramount in maintaining the integrity of law enforcement operations. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of access to sensitive citizen data by an officer outside of their usual patrol area and shift. This access appears to be unauthorized and not related to any active case. Option A. Discuss the observed anomaly with other officers to gauge their opinions before deciding on a course of action. Option B. Attempt to independently investigate and rectify the system anomaly without reporting it through official channels. Option C. Ignore the anomaly, assuming it is a minor technical glitch that will resolve itself. Option D. Immediately report the anomaly to the designated supervisor and initiate a formal investigation into the unauthorized access, ensuring all system logs are preserved. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the anomaly to the designated supervisor and initiate a formal investigation into the unauthorized access, ensuring all system logs are preserved. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a potential breach of privacy and departmental policy, creating a professionally challenging scenario that requires careful judgment. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for departmental oversight and accountability with the fundamental rights to privacy of officers and the public they interact with. Mismanagement of this data could lead to legal repercussions, erosion of public trust, and internal disciplinary actions. The best approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes transparency, strict adherence to policy, and robust data security. This includes immediately reporting the observed anomaly to the designated supervisor or internal affairs division, as per Dallas Police Department, DPD, civil service rules, and Texas privacy laws concerning law enforcement data. Concurrently, ensuring the system's logs are secured and not tampered with, while initiating a formal investigation into the unauthorized access, is crucial. This approach upholds the DPD's commitment to ethical conduct, legal compliance, and the protection of sensitive information. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the anomaly, assuming it is a minor technical glitch. This failure to report and investigate violates the DPD's duty to maintain secure and lawful data handling practices, potentially leading to undetected misuse of sensitive information and a breach of public trust. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to rectify the system anomaly independently, without proper authorization or documentation. This bypasses established protocols for investigating system breaches and could inadvertently destroy evidence or create further security vulnerabilities, violating DPD policy on system access and data integrity. Finally, sharing the details of the anomaly with colleagues outside of the official investigation chain of command is also an incorrect approach. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could compromise the integrity of the investigation, potentially violating DPD policies on information sharing and disciplinary procedures. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the potential ethical and legal implications of the situation. This is followed by consulting relevant departmental policies and state laws. The next step involves reporting the issue through the proper channels and cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation, ensuring all actions are documented and authorized. Question 9. The control framework reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer has recently learned that a close family member is a person of interest in an ongoing criminal investigation being handled by a different unit within the department. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take to uphold departmental integrity and ethical standards in Dallas, Texas? Option A. Avoid any discussion or interaction related to the investigation and hope that the conflict resolves itself without formal reporting. Option B. Immediately report the personal relationship and potential conflict of interest to their commanding officer and the lead investigator of the case, requesting to be recused from any involvement. Option C. Discuss the investigation with their family member to understand their side of the story before reporting the relationship to superiors. Option D. Continue to participate in the investigation as usual, but discreetly try to gather information that might exonerate their family member. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the personal relationship and potential conflict of interest to their commanding officer and the lead investigator of the case, requesting to be recused from any involvement. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a Dallas Police Department DPD officer is faced with a potential conflict of interest due to a personal relationship with an individual involved in a pending investigation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly tests the officer's adherence to ethical standards and departmental regulations designed to ensure impartiality and public trust. The officer must navigate the delicate balance between their personal connections and their sworn duty to uphold the law without bias. Failure to manage this conflict appropriately could lead to accusations of favoritism, compromise the integrity of the investigation, and erode public confidence in the DPD. The best approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the commanding officer and the relevant investigative unit. This proactive step allows for proper management of the conflict, which may include the officer's recusal from any aspect of the investigation. This aligns with DPD's internal affairs policies and the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, which mandate officers to act with integrity, avoid conflicts of interest, and maintain public trust. By disclosing the relationship, the officer demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and ensures that the investigation proceeds without the appearance or reality of impropriety. An approach that involves continuing to participate in the investigation while downplaying the significance of the personal relationship is ethically unsound and violates DPD policy. This failure to disclose creates a hidden conflict of interest, potentially leading to biased decision-making or the perception of such bias, thereby undermining the investigation's credibility. Another unacceptable approach is to avoid the investigation entirely without formally reporting the conflict. While this might seem like a way to sidestep the issue, it fails to fulfill the officer's duty to report potential conflicts and can still leave room for suspicion if the officer's prior involvement or knowledge becomes apparent. It also prevents the department from properly reassigning investigative duties. Finally, an approach that involves discussing the investigation with the involved individual to gauge their perspective before reporting the relationship is a severe ethical breach. This constitutes unauthorized disclosure of information and could be construed as an attempt to influence the investigation or obstruct justice, directly contravening DPD regulations and TCOL standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to departmental policy, and ethical conduct. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the immediate steps should be to identify the nature of the relationship, assess its potential impact on official duties, and then report it to the appropriate supervisory authority for guidance and action. This ensures accountability and maintains the integrity of law enforcement operations. Question 10. The control framework reveals that the Dallas Police Department, DPD, has a budget of $50,000 allocated for overtime pay for the upcoming fiscal quarter. During the previous quarter, officers collectively logged 500 approved overtime hours. If the overtime budget remains consistent and the same number of overtime hours are anticipated, and assuming overtime is compensated at a flat rate per hour, what would be the calculated hourly overtime rate for officers in Dallas, Texas? Option A, $15,000 per hour. Option B, $25,000 per hour. Option C, $18,000 per hour. Option D, $20,000 per hour. The correct answer is D, $20,000 per hour. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario requiring careful judgment due to the inherent tension between departmental efficiency and the equitable distribution of overtime compensation, particularly within the Dallas Police Department, DPD civil service context. This situation is professionally challenging because it directly impacts officer morale, perceived fairness, and adherence to established departmental policies and civil service regulations governing overtime. Mismanagement can lead to grievances, legal challenges, and a decline in operational effectiveness. The best approach involves a meticulous calculation of overtime hours based on approved records, ensuring all eligible hours are accounted for and distributed according to DPD's established overtime policies, which are likely guided by Texas state civil service laws and departmental general orders. This method prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and adherence to the established regulatory framework. It ensures that officers are compensated precisely for the overtime they have worked, preventing both underpayment and overpayment, and upholding the principles of fairness and due process mandated by civil service regulations. The calculation would involve summing approved overtime hours for each officer, and then dividing the total available overtime budget by the total eligible overtime hours to determine the per-hour rate, or distributing overtime assignments based on a predefined, equitable system. An approach that prioritizes assigning overtime to officers with the longest tenure, regardless of their actual overtime hours worked, fails to adhere to the principle of compensation for work performed. This would violate DPD's overtime policies and civil service regulations, which mandate that overtime pay is directly tied to hours worked. It would also lead to officers who have worked significant overtime being overlooked for further opportunities, while those with less overtime might receive disproportionate compensation or assignments. Another unacceptable approach is to distribute overtime based on the perceived need for specific skills or specialized units without a clear, documented process that ensures equitable opportunity for all eligible officers. While specialized skills are important, the distribution of overtime, especially paid overtime, must follow established, non-discriminatory procedures. Failing to do so can create an appearance of favoritism and violate civil service principles of merit and equal opportunity. Finally, an approach that relies on informal agreements or subjective assessments of who deserves overtime is professionally unsound and ethically problematic. This bypasses the established control framework and regulatory oversight, opening the door to bias and inconsistency. It undermines the integrity of the overtime system and can lead to significant morale issues and formal complaints. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant DPD policies and Texas civil service laws governing overtime. This involves consulting official documentation, seeking clarification from supervisors or HR if necessary, and using objective data for calculations. When faced with discrepancies or ambiguities, the process should involve documenting all steps, seeking input from relevant stakeholders, e.g., union representatives if applicable, and escalating issues through the proper channels for resolution, always prioritizing fairness, accuracy, and regulatory compliance. Question 11. During the evaluation of a Dallas Police Department, DPD civil service exam, a scenario presents a police officer who has lawfully obtained sensitive personal information during an investigation into a potential financial crime. The information is crucial for the investigation, but also highly private. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to Texas law and DPD policy regarding the handling of such information? Option A. Share the information with a trusted colleague in another unit who has expressed interest in similar cases, believing their insights might be helpful. Option B. Store the sensitive information on a personal encrypted USB drive for easy access and portability. Option C. Discard the information after the initial investigation phase is complete, assuming it is no longer needed. Option D. Secure the information in a locked evidence locker and log its chain of custody meticulously, only accessing it for official investigative purposes and disclosing it strictly through authorized channels as required by law. The correct answer is D. Secure the information in a locked evidence locker and log its chain of custody meticulously, only accessing it for official investigative purposes and disclosing it strictly through authorized channels as required by law. Explanation. During the evaluation of a Dallas Police Department DPD civil service exam question, candidate encounters a scenario involving the proper handling of sensitive information obtained during an official investigation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the officer to balance the need for thorough investigation with the strict legal and ethical obligations regarding the privacy and confidentiality of individuals. Mismanagement of such information can lead to severe legal repercussions, damage to public trust, and compromise future investigations. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to the Texas Public Information Act and DPD internal policies. The best approach involves meticulously documenting the information, securing it according to DPD policy for sensitive evidence, and only disclosing it through official channels to authorized personnel or legal entities as dictated by law. This aligns with the principles of lawful information handling, evidence integrity, and the protection of individual privacy rights as enshrined in Texas law. It ensures that information is used solely for legitimate investigative purposes and is not improperly disseminated, thereby upholding both legal requirements and ethical standards. An incorrect approach would be to share the sensitive information with a colleague not directly involved in the investigation, even if they are a fellow officer, without proper authorization or a demonstrated need to know. This violates the principle of limited disclosure and could breach confidentiality, potentially leading to unauthorized access or use of the information. Another incorrect approach is to retain the information in an unsecured personal file or electronic device. This creates a significant risk of data breach and unauthorized access, failing to meet the security standards required for sensitive investigative materials and violating DPD policy. Finally, destroying the information prematurely without following proper retention and disposal protocols, even if it seems inconvenient, is also an improper approach. This could hinder future review, audits, or legal proceedings and may contravene specific record-keeping mandates. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, departmental policy, and ethical considerations. This involves understanding the specific regulations governing information handling, like the Texas Public Information Act, adhering strictly to DPD's internal policies on evidence management and confidentiality, and considering the potential impact of any action on the individuals involved and the integrity of the investigation. When in doubt, seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel is a critical step in ensuring proper and lawful conduct. Question 12. What factors determine the appropriate level of police intervention when responding to a tip about a suspicious individual carrying a weapon in a public park in Dallas, Texas? Option A. The general reputation of the park as a high-crime area and the mere presence of individuals matching a broad suspect description. Option B. The officer's direct observations of the individual's behavior and any corroborating details from the tip, which inform the establishment of reasonable suspicion for further lawful action. Option C. The immediate need to detain everyone present for questioning to quickly identify the potential threat, regardless of individual behavior. Option D. The officer's personal belief that a crime is likely occurring, without the need for specific, articulable facts to justify intervention. The correct answer is B. The officer's direct observations of the individual's behavior and any corroborating details from the tip, which inform the establishment of reasonable suspicion for further lawful action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the immediate need for information to address a potential public safety threat with the legal and ethical obligations to respect individual privacy and due process. Officers must act decisively, but also within the bounds of the law and departmental policy, which are designed to protect citizens' rights. Misjudging the situation could lead to legal repercussion, erosion of public trust, and compromised investigations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves officers gathering as much information as possible through direct observation and immediate, non-intrusive questioning of individuals present at the scene. This approach prioritizes obtaining first-hand, verifiable information that can establish reasonable suspicion or probable cause without infringing on constitutional rights. If reasonable suspicion is established, officers can then proceed with lawful investigative steps, such as brief detentions for questioning or pat-downs for weapons if a safety concern exists. This aligns with Texas law and DPD policy, which require specific justifications for any infringement on an individual's liberty or privacy. The focus is on building a case for further action based on observed facts and lawful interactions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately detaining all individuals present and conducting a thorough search of their belongings based solely on the general description of a suspect, and the location being a known area for illicit activity. This is legally flawed because a general description and a high crime area, without more specific information or observed suspicious behavior, do not typically rise to the level of reasonable suspicion required for a lawful detention or search under Texas law. This approach risks violating individuals' Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, and could lead to civil liability and disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the potential threat and leave the scene without any investigation, assuming the report might be false. This is professionally negligent and fails to uphold the DPD's duty to protect the public. While officers must act within legal parameters, they also have a responsibility to investigate credible reports of potential criminal activity, especially those involving weapons. Failing to investigate could have severe consequences if a crime subsequently occurs. A third incorrect approach is to immediately broadcast a detailed description of the individuals and request a full stop and search of anyone matching the description, without first attempting to corroborate the initial report or observe any suspicious behavior. This overreaches the authority granted by a general tip and could lead to the harassment of innocent citizens, violating their rights and damaging community relations. It bypasses the necessary steps of establishing reasonable suspicion or probable cause based on observed facts. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a tiered approach to investigations. First, observe and gather information passively. Second, engage in non-intrusive questioning to clarify the situation and establish reasonable suspicion. Third, if reasonable suspicion is met, proceed with lawful investigative actions such as brief detentions or pat-downs if a safety concern is present. Fourth, if probable cause is established, consider more intrusive measures like arrests or searches. Throughout this process, officers must continuously assess the evolving circumstances and ensure their actions are justified by specific, articulable facts, and are consistent with Texas law and DPD policy. Question 13. The control framework reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer has been assigned to investigate a potential criminal matter where the primary suspect is their sibling. Considering the Dallas Police Department's internal policies and Texas state law regarding public service ethics, which course of action best upholds the officer's professional responsibilities and the integrity of the investigation? Option A. Conduct the investigation as assigned, believing their personal integrity will prevent any bias from influencing their actions. Option B. Immediately report the familial relationship to their direct supervisor and the appropriate internal affairs division to request reassignment or guidance on managing the conflict. Option C. Proceed with the investigation, but discreetly avoid any lines of inquiry that might directly implicate their sibling. Option D. Assign a junior officer to handle the investigation, without informing their supervisor of the familial connection. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the familial relationship to their direct supervisor and the appropriate internal affairs division to request reassignment or guidance on managing the conflict. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a Dallas Police Department (DPD) officer is faced with a potential conflict of interest involving a close family member. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the officer to navigate personal relationships while upholding the integrity and impartiality of law enforcement, as mandated by the Dallas Police Department's internal policies and Texas state law concerning public service ethics. The officer must balance loyalty to family with their sworn duty to serve and protect the public without prejudice. The best professional approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict to the officer's supervisor and the relevant Internal Affairs Division. This approach is correct because it adheres to the DPD's established ethical guidelines and Texas government code, which emphasize the importance of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. By reporting the situation, the officer initiates a formal process for managing the conflict, ensuring that appropriate measures are taken to maintain objectivity and prevent any undue influence or bias in the investigation. This proactive step safeguards the integrity of the investigation and the public's trust in the DPD. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investigation without disclosing the familial relationship. This failure directly violates the DPD's Code of Conduct and ethical standards, which require officers to report any circumstances that could compromise their impartiality. Such a failure could lead to accusations of bias, compromise the validity of any evidence gathered, and undermine the credibility of the entire investigation. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the investigation to a subordinate officer without informing the supervisor. While this might seem like an attempt to avoid direct involvement, it bypasses the established chain of command and the formal conflict of interest reporting procedures. This can create confusion, lead to inconsistent handling of the case, and still leave the department vulnerable to claims of impropriety if the familial connection is later discovered. A further incorrect approach is to subtly steer the investigation away from sensitive areas that might directly implicate the family member. This is a form of active concealment and bias, which is a severe ethical and regulatory breach. It demonstrates a clear intent to protect the family member rather than to conduct a fair and thorough investigation, thereby betraying the public trust and the officer's oath. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of departmental policies on conflicts of interest, a commitment to transparency, and the courage to report potential issues promptly. Officers should always err on the side of caution and disclose any situation that could be perceived as a conflict, allowing supervisors and internal affairs to make informed decisions about case management and officer assignments. Question 14. Market research demonstrates that public interest in ongoing criminal investigations can be high. A Dallas Police Department officer, while reviewing case files, is approached by a local television reporter who expresses a strong interest in a particular ongoing investigation, claiming it serves a significant public interest. The reporter asks for specific details about the investigation, including witness statements and evidence collected. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Dallas Police Department officer in this situation? Option A. Inform the reporter that any request for investigative information must be submitted through the official DPD Public Information Officer or relevant supervisory channels for review and approval according to departmental policy and Texas law. Option B. Advise the reporter to file a formal public information request with the City of Dallas, assuming all details of the investigation will be made available. Option C. Share the information with a colleague in a different DPD division who has a personal interest in the case, suggesting they can provide context to the reporter. Option D. Provide the reporter with the requested details directly, explaining that the information is being shared to foster transparency and inform the public about important community matters. The correct answer is A. Inform the reporter that any request for investigative information must be submitted through the official DPD Public Information Officer or relevant supervisory channels for review and approval according to departmental policy and Texas law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Dallas Police Department (DPD) officer regarding the handling of sensitive information obtained during an investigation. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for departmental efficiency and potential public interest with the strict legal and ethical obligations to protect individual privacy and due process rights. Mismanagement of this information could lead to legal repercussions for the officer and the department, damage public trust, and compromise ongoing investigations. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with Texas law and DPD policy. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves adhering strictly to established DPD policies and Texas statutes governing the dissemination of investigative information. This means that any request for such information must be formally processed through the appropriate channels, likely involving a supervisor's review and approval, and potentially a court order or subpoena, depending on the nature of the information and the requesting party. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of due process, protects the privacy rights of individuals involved in the investigation, and ensures compliance with legal mandates for information handling. Texas law, like that in most jurisdictions, places significant restrictions on the disclosure of non-public information obtained during law enforcement investigations to prevent misuse and protect individuals' rights. DPD policies are designed to operationalize these legal requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disclosing the information directly to the reporter without formal authorization, even if the reporter claims it is for a public interest story, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This bypasses established protocols designed to safeguard sensitive data and could violate Texas privacy laws and DPD disciplinary rules regarding the unauthorized release of information. It risks compromising the investigation, jeopardizing the safety of individuals, and exposing the department to civil liability. Providing the information to a colleague in another department for informational purposes without proper authorization is also professionally unacceptable. While the intent might seem benign, it still constitutes an unauthorized disclosure. This action undermines the chain of command and DPD's internal control mechanisms for sensitive data. It could lead to the information being further disseminated inappropriately, creating similar risks as disclosure to an external party. Suggesting the reporter obtain the information through a public information request without verifying the discoverability of the specific details is also problematic. While public information requests are a legitimate avenue for accessing government records, certain investigative details are exempt from public disclosure under Texas law to protect ongoing investigations, privacy, or other compelling interests. Failing to guide the reporter accurately on what might be legally accessible could lead to frustration and potentially misrepresent the department's transparency capabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. When faced with requests for sensitive information, the first step is to identify the nature of the information and the requesting party. The next step is to consult relevant departmental policies and state statutes to determine the legal and procedural requirements for disclosure. If unsure, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the department's legal counsel is paramount. The guiding principle should always be to protect the integrity of investigations, the rights of individuals, and the public trust, while operating within the bounds of the law. Question 15. The control framework reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer has learned that a close family member is a potential witness in an ongoing criminal investigation that the officer is assigned to. The officer has not yet directly interacted with the family member in an official capacity regarding this case. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take to uphold the integrity of the investigation and departmental standards in Dallas, Texas? Option A. Continue with the investigation as assigned, but make a mental note to be extra objective when interacting with the family member. Option B. Immediately report the familial relationship to their commanding officer and request to be recused from any further involvement in the investigation. Option C. Discuss the situation with a trusted senior officer informally to gauge their opinion on how to proceed without formally reporting it. Option D. Discreetly inform the family member that they should not discuss the case with anyone, but continue with the investigation without reporting the relationship. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the familial relationship to their commanding officer and request to be recused from any further involvement in the investigation. Explanation. The control framework reveals a complex situation involving potential conflicts of interest and the integrity of investigations within the Dallas Police Department, DPD. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires officers to balance their duty to uphold departmental policy and the law with personal relationships and the perception of fairness. The integrity of DPD investigations, and by extension public trust, hinges on officers acting impartially and avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands. The best approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the commanding officer and recusal from any direct involvement in the investigation. This approach is correct because it adheres to fundamental principles of ethical conduct and departmental regulations designed to prevent conflicts of interest. By reporting the relationship, the officer demonstrates integrity and allows for proper management of the situation, ensuring that the investigation proceeds without bias. Recusal removes the officer from a position where their impartiality could be questioned, thereby safeguarding the investigation's credibility and upholding the DPD's commitment to fair and unbiased law enforcement. This aligns with the DPD's internal affairs policies, which mandate reporting of potential conflicts of interest to maintain investigative integrity. An approach that involves continuing to participate in the investigation while downplaying the relationship's significance is ethically flawed. It risks compromising the investigation by introducing bias, even if unintentional. This failure to disclose and recuse violates the DPD's code of conduct, which emphasizes impartiality and the avoidance of situations that could lead to a conflict of interest or the appearance thereof. Another incorrect approach, which is to avoid any contact with the involved individual outside of official duties but continue to participate in the investigation, is also problematic. While it attempts to mitigate direct interaction, it does not address the underlying conflict of interest or the potential for subconscious bias. The DPD's regulations require proactive disclosure and management of such conflicts, not merely avoidance of direct personal engagement while still being involved in the case. Finally, an approach that involves seeking advice from colleagues informally without formal reporting to a supervisor is insufficient. While seeking counsel is often beneficial, it does not fulfill the departmental requirement for formal disclosure and management of conflicts of interest. This informal approach can lead to inconsistent advice and does not provide the necessary oversight or documentation to ensure the integrity of the investigation and protect the officer from potential disciplinary action. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to policy, and the preservation of public trust. This involves recognizing potential conflicts of interest early, understanding the relevant departmental policies and ethical guidelines, and taking decisive action to mitigate risks, which often includes formal reporting and recusal. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that when a high-profile incident occurs in Dallas, the Public Information Officer, PO, must decide how to communicate with the media and the public. Considering the Dallas Police Department's commitment to transparency and adherence to Texas law, which of the following communication strategies best balances these obligations while protecting the integrity of an ongoing investigation? Option A. Confirm factual accuracy of all released information, adhere strictly to Dallas Police Department public information policies, and consult with the legal advisor to ensure compliance with Texas Government Code Chapter 552 and privacy statutes before any public statement. Option B. Immediately release all preliminary details gathered to the media to be the first to provide information and demonstrate responsiveness. Option C. Withhold all information from the public and media, citing an ongoing investigation, until the case is fully closed, regardless of the public's interest. Option D. Provide select details and background information only to specific media contacts who have historically reported favorably on the department. The correct answer is A. Confirm factual accuracy of all released information, adhere strictly to Dallas Police Department public information policies, and consult with the legal advisor to ensure compliance with Texas Government Code Chapter 552 and privacy statutes before any public statement. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that effective communication and transparency are paramount in maintaining public trust and ensuring operational efficiency within the Dallas Police Department, DPD. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information dissemination with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive investigative details and the privacy of individuals involved. A hasty or incomplete release of information could compromise an ongoing investigation, lead to public misinterpretation, or violate departmental policies and Texas law regarding open records and privacy. The best approach involves a measured and legally compliant release of information. This means confirming the factual accuracy of all details before dissemination, adhering strictly to the Dallas Police Department established public information policies and procedures, and consulting with the legal advisor to ensure compliance with Texas Government Code Chapter 552, Public Information Act, and any other relevant state statutes concerning privacy and ongoing investigations. This approach prioritizes accuracy, legal adherence, and the integrity of the investigative process, thereby upholding public trust and departmental standards. Releasing preliminary or unverified information to the media without proper vetting is professionally unacceptable. This action risks spreading misinformation, potentially jeopardizing the investigation by alerting suspects, and could lead to legal repercussions for the department if privacy rights are violated. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to withhold all information indefinitely, citing an ongoing investigation without providing any context or reassurance to the public. While investigations require discretion, a complete information blackout can foster speculation and erode public confidence, failing to meet the department's obligation for reasonable transparency. Finally, selectively releasing information to favored media outlets is unethical and unprofessional. This practice creates an uneven playing field, can lead to biased reporting, and undermines the department's commitment to impartial public communication. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core objective, informing the public, then assesses the constraints, legal requirements, investigative integrity, privacy concerns, and finally, evaluates potential communication strategies against these factors. This involves proactive consultation with legal counsel and adherence to established departmental protocols for public information releases. Question 17. Compliance review shows that during a recent incident in Dallas, Texas, an officer discovered a mobile device at the scene that appeared to contain information relevant to the ongoing investigation. The officer was unsure of the proper procedure for handling this type of potential evidence. Considering the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and Dallas Police Department policies, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the officer? Option A. Attempt to access the device's contents to quickly ascertain its relevance to the investigation. Option B. Leave the device at the scene, assuming it will be processed later by specialized units. Option C. Allow another officer without specialized digital forensics training to examine the device in the field. Option D. Secure the device and immediately notify a supervisor and the relevant investigative unit for guidance on proper collection and analysis. The correct answer is D. Secure the device and immediately notify a supervisor and the relevant investigative unit for guidance on proper collection and analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the immediate need for information with the established protocols for handling sensitive data and potential evidence. Officers must act decisively while adhering strictly to the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and Dallas Police Department policies to avoid compromising an investigation or violating an individual's rights. The pressure of a developing situation can lead to hasty decisions that bypass necessary procedures. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately notifying a supervisor and the appropriate investigative unit. This approach is correct because it ensures that the handling of potential evidence and sensitive information is managed by trained personnel who understand the legal and departmental requirements for chain of custody, preservation of evidence, and proper documentation, as mandated by the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, particularly articles related to search and seizure and the preservation of evidence. This also aligns with Dallas Police Department general orders regarding evidence handling and supervisory notification. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately attempting to access the contents of the device without proper authorization or supervision. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses established protocols for digital evidence collection and analysis, potentially violating privacy rights and compromising the integrity of the evidence under the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure. It also fails to involve supervisors who are responsible for ensuring adherence to departmental policy. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the device entirely and proceed with other aspects of the investigation without documenting its presence or potential relevance. This is an ethical and procedural failure. Failing to secure and properly process potential evidence can lead to its loss or contamination, hindering the investigation and potentially violating the duty to collect all relevant information. It also neglects the requirement to document all findings and actions taken, as per departmental policy. A third incorrect approach is to allow an untrained officer to attempt to access the device's data in the field without specialized training or supervision. This risks accidental deletion of data, improper collection methods, or misinterpretation of findings, all of which can render the evidence inadmissible in court and violate departmental guidelines for digital forensics. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal statutes and departmental policy. When encountering potential evidence, especially digital devices, the immediate step should be to secure the item, prevent tampering, and then escalate to the appropriate supervisory and investigative personnel. This ensures that all actions taken are legally sound, procedurally correct, and contribute to a robust and admissible body of evidence. The focus should always be on the integrity of the investigation and the rights of individuals involved. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a Dallas Police Department officer is suspected of serious misconduct that could potentially lead to criminal charges. The Internal Affairs Division, IAD, is initiating an investigation and plans to interview the officer. What is the most appropriate course of action for the IAD investigator to ensure compliance with Texas law and departmental policy during the interview? Option A. Inform the officer that cooperation is mandatory for all departmental personnel and that refusal to answer questions will result in disciplinary action, regardless of potential criminal implications. Option B. Conduct the interview after providing the officer with a clear explanation of their rights, including the right to remain silent and the right to have legal representation present, especially if the questioning could elicit self-incriminating statements that might be used in a criminal proceeding. Option C. Proceed with the interview immediately to gather facts, assuming that since it is an internal investigation, the officer's constitutional rights regarding self-incrimination do not fully apply. Option D. Record the interview without explicitly informing the officer of their rights, believing that the recording itself serves as sufficient documentation and protection for the department. The correct answer is B. Conduct the interview after providing the officer with a clear explanation of their rights, including the right to remain silent and the right to have legal representation present, especially if the questioning could elicit self-incriminating statements that might be used in a criminal proceeding. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation requiring careful judgment due to the inherent tension between departmental efficiency and individual rights within the Dallas Police Department, DPD, civil service system. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely information gathering for internal investigations with the constitutional rights of officers, particularly the right against self-incrimination and the expectation of privacy. Missteps can lead to legal challenges, damage to departmental morale, and erosion of public trust. The best approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to Texas law and DPD internal policies regarding investigations. This means ensuring that any questioning of an officer is conducted in a manner that respects their rights, including providing appropriate notifications, and ensuring the questioning is not unduly coercive. Specifically, if an officer is being questioned about potential misconduct that could lead to criminal charges, they must be afforded their constitutional rights, including the right to remain silent and the right to counsel, as mandated by Texas law and established case law. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and due process, thereby protecting both the individual officer and the integrity of the investigation. An approach that proceeds with questioning without clearly informing the officer of their rights, especially when the questioning could lead to criminal charges, violates the officer's Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, as recognized and applied in Texas. Failure to provide Miranda warnings, or their equivalent in an internal investigation context where criminal culpability is a possibility, renders any statements obtained potentially inadmissible in both internal disciplinary proceedings and subsequent criminal prosecutions. Another unacceptable approach is to assume that because it is an internal investigation, standard constitutional protections do not apply. Texas law and DPD policies are designed to ensure fairness. Ignoring these protections, even with the goal of uncovering misconduct, undermines the legitimacy of the investigation and can lead to legal repercussions for the department. Finally, an approach that relies solely on departmental expediency without considering the legal and ethical implications for the officer is professionally unsound. The decision-making process should involve consulting with legal counsel or experienced internal affairs investigators to ensure all actions are compliant with Texas law and DPD regulations, thereby safeguarding the investigation's integrity and the rights of all involved. Question 19. System analysis indicates that a Dallas Police Department (DPD) officer has just recovered a valuable piece of jewelry that was stolen from a victim. The victim is present at the scene, visibly distressed, and pleading to have their jewelry back immediately. Considering DPD's established protocols for handling recovered property and the need for compassionate victim interaction, what is the most appropriate course of action for the officer? Option A. Promise the victim that their jewelry will be returned to them as soon as possible, without detailing the procedural requirements or potential delays. Option B. Focus strictly on the procedural logging of the jewelry, disregarding the victim's emotional state and their pleas for immediate return. Option C. Immediately return the recovered jewelry to the victim without any documentation, prioritizing their immediate emotional relief. Option D. Secure the recovered jewelry according to DPD policy for evidence logging and chain of custody, while simultaneously reassuring the victim that their property will be handled properly and explaining the necessary steps for its eventual return. The correct answer is D. Secure the recovered jewelry according to DPD policy for evidence logging and chain of custody, while simultaneously reassuring the victim that their property will be handled properly and explaining the necessary steps for its eventual return. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Dallas Police Department (DPD) officer due to the potential conflict between departmental policy regarding the handling of recovered property and the victim's immediate emotional distress. The officer must balance the procedural requirements for evidence logging and chain of custody with the need for compassionate and effective victim assistance. Failure to adhere to policy can compromise an investigation, while a lack of empathy can damage public trust and hinder future cooperation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the recovered property in a manner that preserves its evidentiary integrity, while simultaneously offering the victim immediate support and information. This approach acknowledges the victim's distress and the importance of their property, while strictly adhering to DPD's established procedures for handling recovered items. This aligns with the DPD's commitment to both effective law enforcement and community service, ensuring that property is properly documented and returned when possible, without jeopardizing the investigative process. The officer should explain the process to the victim, assuring them that their property will be handled according to procedure and that efforts will be made for its return. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately hand the recovered property back to the victim without any documentation or adherence to departmental procedures. This fails to maintain the chain of custody, which is critical for any potential evidence in a criminal investigation. It also bypasses the required logging of recovered property, which is essential for accountability and tracking. This action could lead to the property being lost, tampered with, or deemed inadmissible in court, directly violating DPD policy and undermining the integrity of the investigation. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the victim's emotional state and focus solely on the procedural aspects of property recovery, without offering any reassurance or explanation. While procedural adherence is vital, neglecting the victim's immediate needs can create a negative perception of the DPD and discourage future cooperation. This approach, though procedurally sound in isolation, lacks the necessary component of community engagement and victim support, which are integral to effective policing. A third incorrect approach is to promise the victim immediate return of the property without understanding the full context of its recovery or potential evidentiary value. This sets an unrealistic expectation and could lead to disappointment and distrust if the property cannot be immediately returned due to ongoing investigative needs or legal requirements. It also risks compromising the investigation by prematurely releasing potential evidence. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures, while also demonstrating empathy and effective communication. This involves a multifaceted approach. First, understanding and applying departmental regulations regarding evidence handling and property recovery. Second, assessing the immediate needs and emotional state of the victim. And third, communicating clearly and transparently with the victim about the process and expectations. The goal is to achieve both procedural compliance and positive community relations. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need for improved accuracy in overtime pay calculations within the Dallas Police Department. Officer John Smith, a patrol officer with an hourly base rate of $28.50, worked 12 hours of overtime during a recent pay period. According to Dallas Police Department policy, overtime hours worked on weekends are compensated at 1.75 times the regular hourly rate. Assuming all 12 overtime hours were worked on a weekend, what is the total overtime pay Officer Smith is entitled to for this period, calculated according to departmental policy and Texas labor guidelines for public employees? Option A, $610.00. Option B, $598.50. Option C, $500.00. Option D, $498.75. The correct answer is B, $598.50. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Dallas Police Department (DPD) officer regarding the accurate calculation of overtime pay, which directly impacts departmental budget adherence and employee compensation fairness. Miscalculations can lead to financial discrepancies, potential grievances from officers, and even legal challenges if pay is consistently under or overallocated. The officer must demonstrate a strong understanding of DPD's specific overtime policies and the relevant Texas labor laws governing public sector employment. The best approach involves meticulously applying the DPD's established overtime calculation formula, which accounts for base pay rates, approved overtime hours, and any applicable overtime multipliers as defined by departmental policy and Texas law. This method ensures compliance with both internal regulations and external legal mandates, guaranteeing accurate and equitable compensation. Specifically, the calculation should follow the formula: total overtime pay equals hourly rate asterisk overtime hours asterisk overtime multiplier. For instance, if an officer's hourly rate is $25, they work 10 hours of overtime at a 1.5x multiplier. The calculation would be $25 asterisk 10 asterisk 1.5 equals $375. This systematic and policy-driven approach minimizes the risk of error and upholds financial integrity. An incorrect approach would be to use a simplified or estimated calculation without referencing the official DPD overtime policy. This could lead to underpayment, causing officer dissatisfaction and potential labor disputes, or overpayment, resulting in budget overruns and potential disciplinary action for financial mismanagement. Another flawed approach is to rely on memory or past practices without verifying current policy, as overtime rules and multipliers can change. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and adherence to established procedures, which is a critical failure in a role that demands precision and accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes accuracy and compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the specific policy or regulation governing the task DPD overtime policy, Texas labor laws. 2. Gathering all necessary data: officers' base pay, recorded overtime hours, applicable multipliers. 3. Applying the correct formula or procedure systematically. 4. Verifying the calculation against policy and, if possible, cross-referencing with a supervisor or payroll department. 5. Documenting the calculation process for transparency and auditability.